February 8th, 2019. I skipped yesterday. Started out with such promise. It was an odd day. Maybe I was under psychic attack. Is psychic attack possible? I'm going to rule it out of the realm of possibility. Is it probable? It's a weird world these days. So, disclaimer for the day is that I'm not any kind of counselor or mental health therapist. I just have permission to read this material from my therapists and the people that teach this class, so that I can share my experience. So, emotion regulation is, and I think it's funny, I mean, just in case anyone ever listens to this, yeah, I know my tech is really sad. I don't got a screen scene going on behind me. I'm doing this because I'm mental, and sort of like it's a very controlled form of screaming. As a teenager, I used to do uncontrolled screaming, so this is much better, I think. So, alright. So emotions are biological mechanisms that cause us to act. And we want to balance our emotions with our logical stuff so that we can be in wise mind. So that's what this is about. And I'm going through the the 15 styles of distorted thinking. It's the expanded version. And so these are cognitive distortions. These are ways that we can distort our thinking, and that will cause us to feel unhappy emotions, or maybe too happy emotions, just like not real emotions. There's the dumb thing. Apparently I should read. So, cognitive distortion, emotional distortion number 6 is personalization. Oh yeah, if you watch this, you're doing it at your own risk. Always important to get professional counseling. See January 22 video. Personalization is the tendency to relate everything around you to yourself. A somewhat depressed mother blames herself when she sees any sadness in her children. Maybe. Well, I'm just going to take their word for it. A recently married man thinks that every time his wife talks about tiredness, she is doing so because she's tired of him. A man whose wife complains about rising prices hears the complaint as an attack on his ability to provide for the family. A major aspect of personalization is the habit of continually comparing ourselves to other people. He plays piano so much better than I do. I'm not smart enough to go with this crowd. She knows herself a lot better than I do. He feels things so deeply while I'm dead inside. I'm the slowest person in the office. He's dumb and I'm smart. I'm better looking. They listen to her but not to me. The opportunities for comparison never end. The underlying assumption is that your worth is questionable. You are therefore continually forced to test your value as a person by measuring yourself against others. If you come out better, you have a moment's relief. If you come up short, you feel diminished. I got my lip earlier, but owie. The basic thinking error in personalization is that you interpret each experience, each conversation, each look as a clue to your own worth and value. 7 is control fallacies. There are 2 ways you can distort your sense of power and control. You can see yourself as helpless and externally controlled, or as omnipotent and responsible for everyone around you. Feeling externally controlled keeps you stuck. You don't believe you can really affect the basic shape of your life, let alone make any difference in the world. Everywhere you look, you see evidence of human helplessness. Someone or something else is responsible for your pain, your loss, and your failure. Oh, blah. They did it to you. You find it difficult to strive for solutions because they probably wouldn't work anyway. Well, and one thing I learned, this didn't used to be my issue at all, and I would get so irritated, in fact, with people that had this issue. And there's quite a bit going on in the world that this material just kind of glosses over and ignores. So if we were dealing with each other just on a person-to-person basis without all the other stuff that comes along with people, their lineage, their family connections, their friendship connections, their debt to society, to themselves, to the banking world, just like all of that affects every single aspect of every single relationship. So, yeah. So take this with a grain of salt. That's what I would do if I was taking this, which I did. And, yeah. Salt made it better. Okay. An extreme example of this fallacy is the person who walks through Skid Row wearing 3 diamond rings and a $500 watch. He feels helpless and resentful when he gets mugged. He can't imagine how he had anything to do with it. He was the passive victim. The truth of the matter is that we are constantly making decisions and that every decision affects our lives. In some way, we are responsible for nearly everything that happens to us. I mean, I guess that's true to some degree. The opposite of the fallacy of external control is the fallacy of omnipotent control. If you experience this distortion, you feel responsible for everything and everybody. You carry the world on your shoulders. Everyone at work depends on you. Your friends depend on you. You are responsible for many people's happiness, and any neglect on your part may leave them lonely, rejected, lost, or frightened. You have to right all wrongs, feel every need, and balm each hurt. And if you don't, you feel guilty. Omnipotence depends on 3 elements: a sensitivity to the needs of people around you, yep, and an exaggerated belief in your own power to fill those needs and the expectations that you and not they are responsible for filling those needs. I don't know about the exaggerated belief. Some people are just really good at stuff. They're like better at it than you could ever figure out how to be on your own, so I'm not sure. And they teach you stuff, so I'm not sure. But I'm not really arguing. I'm just supposed to give my, I'm allowed to give my own thoughts. 8. Fallacy of fairness. This distorted thinking style hinges on the application of legal and contractual rules to the vagaries of interpersonal relations. The trouble is that 2 people seldom agree on what fairness is, and there is no court or final arbiter to help them. Fairness is a subjective assessment of how much of what one expected, needed, or hoped for has been provided by the other person. Fairness is so conveniently defined, so temptingly self-serving, that each person gets locked into his or her own point of view. The result is a sense of living in the trenches and a feeling of ever-growing resentment. The fallacy of fairness is often expressed in conditional assumptions. If he loved me, he'd do the dishes. If he loved me, he'd help me to orgasm. If this was a real marriage, she'd hike with me and learn to like it. If he cared at all, he'd come home right after work. If they valued my work here, they'd get me a nicer desk. It's tempting to make assumptions about how things will change if people were only fair or really valued you. But the other person hardly ever sees it that way, and you end up causing yourself a lot of pain. Life isn't fair. Blaming. There's such relief in knowing who is to blame. There is. If you are suffering, someone must be responsible. You're lonely, hurt, or frightened, and someone must have provoked those feelings. A man got angry because his wife suggested that he build the fence he'd been meaning to put up. She ought to have known how tired he was, and she was being totally insensitive. The problem was that he expected her to be clairvoyant, to read his mind when it was his responsibility to inform her of his fatigue and say no. Blaming often involves making someone else responsible for choices and decisions that are actually your own responsibility. A woman blamed the butcher for selling hamburger that was always full of fat. But it was really her problem. She could have paid more for leaner meat or gone to a different butcher. In blame systems, somebody is always doing it to you, and you have no responsibility to assert your needs, say no, or go anywhere else for what you want. Some people focus blame exclusively on themselves. They beat themselves up constantly for being incompetent, insensitive, stupid, too emotional, etc. They're always ready to be wrong. One woman felt she had spoiled her husband's entire evening when she caused a 15-minute delay in getting to a party. Later, when the party broke up early, she decided that she had bored everyone. That would be a drag. 10. Shoulds. In this distortion, you operate from a list of inflexible rules about how you and other people should act. The rules are right and indisputable. Any deviation from your particular values or standards is bad. As a result, you're often in the position of judging and finding fault. People irritate you. They don't act right and they don't think right. They have unacceptable traits, habits, and opinions that make them hard to tolerate. They should know the rules, and they should follow them. One woman felt that her husband should want to take her on Sunday drives. A man who loved his wife ought to take her to the country and then out to eat in a nice place. The fact that he didn't want to go meant that he thought only about himself. Cue words indicating the presence of this distortion are should, ought, or must. In fact, Albert Ellis dubbed this style of thinking masturbation. Not only are other people being judged, but you are also making yourself suffer with should. You feel compelled to do something or be a certain way, but never bother to ask objectively if it really makes sense. The famous psychiatrist Karen Horney called this the tyranny of should. Maybe you should say Karen Horney. See, and that's what I'm saying. This is just odd material. It was definitely odd material to be reading with my junior high school classmates and a bunch of psychiatrists that were studying people with PTSD. I mean, it's written by shrinks that understand triggers, and they're dealing with a bunch of people that have all kinds of sexual issues, and yet they give us something that they dub the style of thinking masturbation, and there's a famous psychiatrist that's named Karen Horney. I mean, all in the same little should, and we started out with the he should give me an orgasm part too, so I mean, just saying. Then the teachers would assign, you read this, you read this, you read this. Yeah, it was pretty fun. Here is a list of the most common and unreasonable shoulds. I should be the epitome of generosity, consideration, dignity, courage, and unselfishness. I should be the perfect lover, friend, parent, teacher, student, and spouse. I should be able to endure any hardship with equanimity. I should be able to find a quick solution to every problem. I should know, understand, and foresee everything. I should always be spontaneous, and at the same time, I should always control my feelings. I should never feel certain emotions such as anger or jealousy. I should love my children equally. I should never make mistakes. My emotions should be constant. Once I feel love, I should always feel love. I should be totally self-reliant. I should assert myself, and at the same time, I should never hurt anybody else. I should never be tired or get sick. I should always be at peak efficiency. That's the end of shitting on yourself. Now we'll go on to emotional reasoning, number 11. At the root of this distortion is the belief that what you feel must be true. If you feel like a loser, then you must be a loser. If you feel guilty, then you must have done something wrong. If you feel ugly, then you must be ugly. If you feel angry, someone must have taken advantage of you. All the negative things you feel about yourself and others must be true because they feel true. The problem with emotional reasoning is that emotions by themselves have no validity. They are products of what you think. If you have distorted thoughts and beliefs, your emotions will reflect those distortions. Always believing your emotions is like believing everything you see in print. Well, there you go. Don't believe everything you see in print or hear. 12. Fallacy of change. The only person you can really control or have much hope of changing is yourself. The fallacy of change, however, assumes that other people will change to suit you if you just pressure them enough. Your attention and energy are therefore focused on others because your hope for happiness lies in getting them to meet your needs. Strategies for changing others include blaming, demanding, withholding, and trading. The usual result is that the other person feels attacked or pushed around and doesn't change at all. The underlying assumption of this thinking style is that your happiness depends on the actions of others. In fact, your happiness depends on the many thousands of large and small decisions you make during your life. 13. Global labeling. Your supermarket stocks rotten food at rip-off prices. A person who refused to give you a lift home is a total jerk. A quiet guy on a date is labeled a dull clam. Republicans are a bunch of money-hungry corporation toadies. I didn't say that. I mean, it's written here. Your boss is a gutless imbecile. Each of these labels may contain a grain of truth, yet it generalizes one or two qualities into a global judgment. The label ignores all contrary evidence, making your view of the world stereotyped and one-dimensional. Being right, 14. In this distortion, you're usually on the defensive. You must continually prove that your viewpoint is correct. Your assumptions about the world are accurate and all your actions correct. You aren't interested in the possible veracity of a differing opinion, only in defending your own. Every decision you make is right. Every task you perform is done competently. You never make mistakes. Your opinions rarely change because you have difficulty hearing new information. If the facts don't fit what you already believe, you ignore them. An auto mechanic got in the habit of stopping at the bar for 3 or 4 drinks on the way home. Frequently, he got in after 7, and his wife never knew when to have dinner ready. When she confronted him, he got angry and said that a man has a right to relax. She had it soft while he was pulling off cylinder heads all day. The mechanic had to be right and couldn't comprehend his wife's viewpoint. Having to be right makes you very hard of hearing. It also makes you lonely because being right seems more important than an honest, caring relationship. I don't know. I know that you can be addicted to thinking that you're right because you get a hit of dopamine every time that you think you're right. You don't actually have to be right. You just have to think you're right. I did used to be really obsessed with being right, but I'm not really obsessed. 15. Heaven's reward fallacy. In this framework for viewing the world, you always do the right thing in hope of a reward. You sacrifice and slave, and all the while imagine that you're collecting brownie points that you can cash in someday. A housewife cooked elaborate meals for her family and did endless baking and sewing. She drove her children to all their after school activities. The house was immaculate. She carried on for years, all the while waiting for some kind of special reward or appreciation. It never came, and she became increasingly hostile and bitter. The problem was that while she was doing the right thing, she was physically and emotionally bankrupting herself. She had become a crab, and no one wanted to be around her. Well, that's the way that goes. She had become a crab because no one said thank you. And I guess she was either supposed to let the house be dirty or force people to say thank you, which also would be crabby making. Either option. Or what? I mean, see, this is where it just like is difficult. You're like, okay, so what's the answer then with your little example there? What kind of like situation? What kind of example is that if you haven't given us a better solution? What would be a better solution there? I don't know. Chores for your children. That's what I would say. Housekeeper. Maybe they couldn't afford it. And then you do chores for the children. Alright. That is the DBT segment for today, which is February 8th.